This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom. We're all, of course, only too aware of the situation that we face in Israel, with a tremendous intifada that's destroying the lives of so many families, so many individuals. And of course, the turmoil that the whole world is going through to see if there could be any solution. We're not here, though, tonight to talk about a solution. What we're here, though, is to talk about some of the tragedy and some of the incredible pain and anguish that this terrible intifada has caused to individuals, so that you, our viewers, will be able to see the human face of what the intifada has caused and how totally wild, uncontrollable emotions turn to murder in order to be able to take the lives of even young children. Of course, we've tried very hard to focus on the terrorism in Israel, to let you know from the inside out what exactly is going on and what the families are facing in Israel. And tonight we have with us the parents of Kobe Mandell. May his soul rest in peace. A 14-year-old boy who was brutally murdered by the Palestinians. I want to introduce you to Seth and Sherry Mandell, who are with us here from Israel, from their hometown of Turkey on the West Bank. Seth and Sherry, I want to welcome you onto our show, and I hope that we'll be able to share a little bit of our own mourning and our own feelings for both of you, as far as reaching out in whatever way we can here in the States to be able to help you through this time and this period in your lives. Of course, I'm sure during the last months you've gone through an unbelievable, emotional, and in every way a roller coaster as far as what life has been all about. And I wonder if you could just maybe share with us, Seth, perhaps you can start by sharing with us a little bit of the experiences of what the last few months, even pre-Kobe's murder, what has been going on in your lives, and of course what has been happening to you in the recent past.
Well, as you know, the intifada started, this stage of the intifada started about 8 months ago in September. From that time on, our lives became a little bit constricted. We were concerned about driving on the roads. We were concerned about walking through crowded areas in Jerusalem. And you became more aware of what was going on. We never, however, had any thought that such a tragedy as occurred to ourselves and to Kobe could have possibly happened.
Had there been any other terrorist activities in your immediate vicinity before this tragedy with Kobe? Sherry, anything else happen?
Not in Tekoa. The main danger was, in order to get to Jerusalem, we had to go through Efrat and through the tunnel road. Okay. And there were a lot of, there were drive-by shootings on that road. Right. So we were worried about the road, very concerned about the road. But in Tekoa, once we got back to Tekoa, we always breathed a sigh of relief, like, oh,
really, every single time?
I always did. Yeah. I mean,
sure, because there's that fear that at any time something could happen.
On the road, every day there were incidents.
Really?
I mean, in Israel, every day there were incidents. Starting in October, somebody's been killed almost every single day.
Now, you know, let's go back a little bit further. I was asking you to start maybe just a couple months before by Intifada, but probably most of our audience noticed that both of you are American. You're speaking with American accents and wondering, you know, this is not the normal type of settler that we might hear about being on the West Bank. You're American-born and bred, and I understand you were a Hillel director at one time at the University of Maryland. And before you went to Israel, what motivated the two of you to go to Israel, and specifically to go settle in the West Bank in Turkey?
I had lived in Israel for a number of years before we got married. Sherry and I met in Israel. Kobe was born in Israel, as was his brother Daniel. We left and spent 7 years in the United States as working for Hillel. But there wasn't a day that went by when I didn't want to go back there to Israel. The draw was continual for me.
The magnetic pull is tremendous.
That's right. I became observant in Israel. My idea of what observant Judaism was came from Jerusalem. So to move from there to American style Orthodox Judaism was always a challenge for me.
Right. Now, did you move to Tekoa for political reasons, to be in the West Bank and to be able to make a statement?
No, we moved to Tekoa because it fulfilled our dream of living in a place with a intensely and committed observant community, and to live in a place of great beauty in a rural environment. It had nothing to do with politics. We moved to Toccoa despite the politics, not because of the politics.
So the misconception that most people have that all these West Bank settlers were causing so much trouble and are the obstacle towards peace in Israel is really a misnomer to a great degree, because there's a tremendous number of people there that are just there because it's a beautiful place to live.
I think statistically somewhere around 85% of the people are there for lifestyle reasons, because it's a very nice place to live.
And not necessarily all are religious either. In fact, in your yeshuv, I understand you told me 50% of the people are not observant.
That's right. Our community is by law, by the bylaws of the community, 50% observant and 50% not observant.
Interesting. Interesting.
In fact, Yosef, the boy who was with Kobe when the two of them were killed, comes from a non-observant family.
Right.
When we spoke to the friends, Kobe and Yosef's friends, and mentioned this to them, they said, so what? Right. On the community itself, whether you're religious or not religious, is not an issue.
Right. Sherry, has anybody talked about leaving Toccoa since this incident? Because of it?
Most people are staying. There are a few people who were ready to leave anyway who are leaving. But no, because when you're there, it's your reality.
Right.
You just go
this
on.
is your home.
But from here, it seemed like, to me, it's like, how can I go back there? It's so scary there from reading the news. But then when I'm there, you just, I mean, before Kobe was murdered, you just handle it and you just pray that it's not going to be you. And you just pretend it's not, it can't happen to you.
Right.
But, you know, it's your home.
Right.
And your kids are in school and we're working and we love our life there.
Right. It's very special. And as you mentioned, it's a beautiful, beautiful area. Now, Kobe had been to this wadi many, many times before, I suppose, the place where he went to that particular day.
He had been to the wadi numbers of times. I wouldn't say many times. It was a place where we didn't let him go by himself. We said that he could go with an adult, someone who knew how to handle himself down there.
Okay.
But being a 13-year-old boy, he decided he was going to go anyway. And what we sort of dreamed about in our worst nightmares, but never expected to happen, in fact, that's what happened.
So you received the news of this attack, and of course your life was turned upside down and inside out. And then during the Shiva, the mourning period itself, I'm sure it was a time of tremendous reinforcement from the community, from your family, from probably people all over Israel and all over the world. The sentiments that were poured out for you, even here in the States, I know, were just unbelievable. And everybody seemed to know Kobe on a first-name basis, and the articles in the newspaper, and everybody just loved this American kid with a baseball cap that was like, could have been anybody's child.
Right, I think that's why it hit the world so hard, because he wasn't an Israeli, he wasn't a foreigner, he was an American in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. And he was just an everyday normal kid. He wasn't a fanatic, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was a beautiful, smart kid, athletic, he had everything going for him.
Yeah, can we show a picture of Kobe? We have two pictures over here. There we have, that's a picture of Kobe. That was just a few months before he was murdered. And this is a family picture of Kobe to the left with the baseball cap with the rest of the family. A cute child, like you said, could have been anybody's child, and really our hearts go out to both of you for your loss. I just want to ask you, I know that you're setting up a foundation in Kobe's memory. And I think that's something that everybody can relate to. I mean, of course, the ripple effect of his life and the meaning of his life and those things that are important to him, that they'll live on through this foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We feel that everybody, every child, every adult, is going to do a certain amount of good in his life. The good that Kobe would have done, the tzedakah, the charity that he would have given, the Torah that he would have studied, the friends who he would have helped. We feel all of that was cut short. In order to fulfill and to fill the void in the world, and the void in ourselves, in our own hearts, that Kobe's murder has left, we want to create a foundation to do good, to in some small way replace the good that was stolen from the world.
All right. So this foundation is something that will be set up specifically in his memory, that will work on a couple of specific projects, I suppose projects that were very close to his heart and something you feel will continue his spirit.
Mm-hmm. There are a number of different projects. two in particular. One is a project to teach baseball. It's called the Sports Integration Project. Teach baseball to Russian immigrants, Ethiopian immigrants, Israelis, and American immigrants. To bring them together as a group of about 50 boys and really have them experience a cohesive style of environment.
Right.
Another is to work with the children and siblings of people who were killed or wounded in terrorist acts. We want to create a camp whereby they themselves will be able to express how they feel and not be looked at kind of like as different or strange because they had this unbelievable experience that separates everybody in the world from them.
Sure, I can imagine. And from what I understand, there's also a law that's up in the House of Representatives for discussion, which is for a very specific purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about what that law is?
Yeah, it's called the Mandell bill, and it's to if terrorists are, if an American citizen is killed anywhere else in the world, the American government offers a reward, a large reward.
Really?
The only place that reward isn't offered is in Israel.
In the whole of Israel?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Nobody will say. None of the government officials will say.
You're kidding. That's
no,
unbelievable.
They all hedge and they just...
So this bill is to include Israel as one of the places where that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it look? I can't see any reason why there shouldn't be a tremendous amount of support.
Well, there are positive movements now toward putting it into effect. But, you know, we don't know.
Right. Of course, these are powers that are bigger than your mind. So we'll see what happens.
But Kobe would be very proud of himself for having a bill in his name.
I'm sure he would.
I know he's jumping in heaven, clapping his hands, because
for him to be
it's
up there,
it's fun for him.
In the spotlights in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And we were from that area, so it's very appropriate. Plus, he was the kind of kid, he had a very legal mind.
Really?
Yeah, he had a very good brain for Gomorrah, and
so he liked the study of Talmud and
he loved it. He was a natural at it. He was a brilliant kid. I mean, every mother thinks their kid is brilliant, but he was a really bright kid, and he really believed in justice. As the oldest child in the family,
really,
he wanted justice. The worst thing I could do was to judge him unfairly.
Interesting.
So, in his name, I feel like we have to go after justice.
Very good. Tell me, let's get down to the politics of Israel now. What's going on? You're, of course, speaking from a unique perspective, both as Americans, also as settlers in the West Bank, also as, of course, victims of this terrorist plague. What do you think is the cause for what's going on now? What is the reason, what is the motivating factor behind why the Palestinians are letting this hatred out in such a terrible, destructive manner?
First of all, we don't think the issue right now is land. We think the issue right now is hate. We believe that Kobe and Yosef were killed in a hate crime. There's no really other explanation for the way that it happened, the brutality with which was expressed through it. The Palestinians are people like everybody else. They don't wake up in the morning hating others. The Palestinians, in my opinion, have been trained to hate by the Palestinian Authority. Since they came to power 5 or 6 years ago, they've been filling the airwaves with hatred and diatribes against Israel and Jews in general. The newspapers are continually calling on people to hate Jews, talking about the kind of anti-Semitic caricatures that the Nazis used in the 30s. I believe that it's instilled right now because of a conscious effort by the Palestinian Authority that the Palestinians at this point hate Jews. The Syrian foreign minister, the Colin Powell of Syria, 2 days after Kobe was killed, came out and said, if every Arab would kill a Jew, we wouldn't have this problem anymore.
Really? Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. How a nation can justify that kind of attitude, it's scary, to say the least.
It's very scary that people can be manipulated in such a way by the media and by their leadership, by their so-called leadership. They should be educating people for peace, and they're educating people to hate.
Sherry, as a mother, how do you deal with that? Knowing that you have children, you have a family, and of course you've suffered this loss, and you have neighbors that have that kind of hatred.
That was the biggest the minute Kobe died, I said to myself, how am I going to deal with this evil? This is such an intense evil. How am I going to go forward after being through this? And that's why that's why we started the foundation. We just said we can't, either we're going to be totally bitter, angry, miserable people and succumb to the evil, or we're going to separate ourselves from it and go forward and say we're not going to buy into it.
Right.
But we also don't trust Yasser Arafat.
No, at this point I don't think that too many people will do.
Right. So I mean, we don't believe that just because there's a movement toward peace that it's politics is not enough. There has to be education.
Oh, sure. You're talking about a total cultural restructuring of the whole Palestinian world, and that's not going to happen in 1 year, 10 years, or even a generation. We're talking about these kids who've been poisoned in such a way that it'll take generations for this change to take place, and it's very unfortunate and sad, but it's something that nobody can possibly predict how this is going to turn out.
I think you're right. I think it's a matter of numbers of years before such a thing can really be corrected, if you will. And the first thing that has to happen is that the world community, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's the United States government, the European government, has to impress upon not only the Palestinians, by the way, but the Syrians and the rest of the Arab world that this kind of hatred is not acceptable. It wouldn't be acceptable for anybody in this country to speak about any other group in this country or any other country the way that the Palestinians and the rest of the Arab world regularly talk about Israelis and Jews.
Right.
It's just outside of our border of what is acceptable behavior. And for some reason, we've allowed and even given honor to people who allow in their society. And by people, I mean the leadership who allow exactly this.
And not only that, but I know that you've written some articles, I believe, that have been published since Kobe's passing concerning the equivocation of the victims, comparing both the Jewish victims to the Palestinian victims, which is a total outrage. And I'm sure to you personally is a tremendous insult and a very hurtful type of statement.
There was recently...
Well, it puts us in the same category as terrorists.
Sure.
And we're not.
Like
the army is not committing terrorism. We're defending ourselves. We're not attacking. And there have to be people, nations have to speak out and say there's a difference between people who are committing the crimes and people who are defending themselves against the crimes. And instead, they're put on the same page and as if it's a baseball game, 1-1.
Right.
So there has to be some evaluation of what's going on rather than just a scorecard.
Right.
It's not morally equivalent to strap explosives to a young boy's body and send him to a group of teenagers to blow them up. That's not more equivalent to an Israeli firing back at a terrorist. And in the event,
or even a stone thrower,
and in the event hurting somebody, that's simply not equivalent. And the world press sees it, or has been trained to see it as equivalent. Partially because if you don't present it that way, the Palestinians will not let you cover the war. They'll simply expel you if you don't present the side of the Palestinian conflict that they want you to present.
Also, it seems like their media relations are better because they speak with one voice. It's a dictatorship,
right?
And the press speaks with one voice. All of the communications speak with one voice.
So it makes for easy sound bites. Well, in Israel, of course,
it's one message. It's great advertising. Whereas Israel, everybody's saying different things, and it's a more confused, more complex reading of the situation.
Right. It's an interesting point.
So it's harder to grasp exactly what's going on.
One of the cultural changes that needs to happen is that we have said for years that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's become a cliche. The fact is that's a cultural issue, that a democratic culture, a democratic society is significantly and qualitatively different from a society which is not a democratic culture. And until such a change occurs amongst the Palestinians, how are you going to create a life of joy and happiness when if an editor of a magazine or a newspaper speaks out against Yasser Arafat, he's arrested.
Right.
You can be killed for saying the wrong thing.
Exactly.
By a Hamas functionary.
Let me ask you a different question on another angle, on a more personal angle. I'm sure many of our viewers are wondering, seeing the two of you and seeing you speak and seeing you hold your own, and of course there's tremendous emotion within and tremendous grief, and people want to know what's going on inside of you. And I don't know if you're up to sharing any of it, but in terms of dealing with your grief, dealing with the faith, dealing with this loss, is there anything on any of those areas that you could perhaps share with us?
I think either it breaks your faith or it creates your faith. I mean, for me, it created faith.
Really?
Oh yeah. The minute
Can you share that? How?
First of all, I didn't daven in the morning, before he died. I mean, on Shabbat, but it wasn't, davening wasn't,
right.
It wasn't a big thing for me. And now, the next day, I started davening. It was like...
And you pray every day and on a regular basis?
Yeah, and also Tehillim, Psalms were the only things that I could read that had meaning to me. It was like as if I had been catapulted into the world of truth, and that the only thing that mattered to me were things that were eternal.
Interesting.
So
That's
it
very
definitely...
Because of course you see life from a very different perspective after having experienced something like this.
Right, everything seemed so trivial.
Right.
And also I wanted to be with Gobi, and where was Gobi? He was with God, and he was in the world of truth, and that's where I wanted to be. So if I wanted to be there, I had to know about it.
Right.
And also the davening, the prayer, talks about the resurrection of the dead. It speaks to what I want to believe
to see
in.
him again.
I mean, so it gives me faith.
Right.
So it's very important to me.
Thank you for sharing that. Seth, can you share anything?
Yeah, I am not a guy who comes by faith or belief easily. And it's something that I consciously work at, have consciously worked at for the past 25 years.
That makes it more meaningful.
Well, exactly. As a result of that, when this happened, the faith actually kicked in. For the first time in my life, it was no longer a game. For the first time in my 25 years of looking into Judaism, it was an imperative that I believe, because if I didn't believe, at that moment I had the choice, when I had the choice to believe or not believe, not believing would have said not only was my life of the last 25 years a lie, but my son's death was meaningless. So the fact that that faith reinforces the whole process of life and the whole process of death simply made it that it strengthened me. It made it impossible not to believe. Not to believe would then become a total violation of everything that existed.
Right, and then also I think in terms of just, like you said, where is he now? He's a soul without a body. When we're alive, we're a soul in a body. But when that body is not there to hug and to kiss and to hold, you know that the soul is still very much alive and so very much there and very much present, but it's just not in the physical form. And when we connect to that soul, we're connecting to the essence of Kobe, to the essence of any of the loved ones that have gone on to the world of truth.
That's what I wanted to learn about after Kobe died. I wanted to know about the soul. I have a friend whose son died, and she said to me after her son died, all she wanted to do was study about the soul and what happens after you die and reincarnation.
Right.
And she said, if he had gone to China, if he was in China for 10 years, I would want to know everything about China. So
Right.
he's up with God. I want to know everything that happens there.
Interesting. It's very true. Well, any last thoughts about the situation in Israel that you can share with our guests before we close up?
I just think that people need to realize that the situation is very complex. That on the other hand, there are good guys and there are bad guys. People who are defending others are good guys. People who are blowing people up on purpose are bad guys. It's not a black and white situation, but it's a situation that you can use your logic and your reason to see, and what you see, to a large extent, is what you get. And all you have to do is read what happens, and you'll know what the truth is over there.
Sherry, anything you'd like to say?
I would just say that even with all the pain and suffering, that Israel is a beautiful country. and that we love living there. It gives us so much. I mean, it took so much from us too, but it's such a vibrant, rich life. And
but you feel part of the purpose of Israel and the purpose of being there and living there and the sense of fulfillment that it gives you.
Well, I feel like when Kobe died, I became a true Israeli.
That was your initiation.
I never felt Israeli. I mean, I am Israeli, but, you know, I never felt part of the culture.
Well, you became part of the land.
Right. Mm-hmm. Not that I wanted it, not that I would wish
that's not the way
for
it to
anybody.
Happen. Of course.
But there's something there. There's something there that's a lot bigger and deeper than we are.
Are you in touch with other families who have also had losses as a result of the Intifada?
Oh, yeah, they came to us. Some of them came to us. Ruthie Gillis came to us. Her husband was killed in a drive-by shooting. He's a doctor. And some other people came to us.
So there was a sense of camaraderie amongst those people who have had common losses.
It was interesting that the people who I think came to us first and were the most comforting were those who had also lost children in canyons and wadis who were hiking.
Really?
And there's a small group, maybe 6 or 8 times it's happened, maybe less, over the past 10 or 20 years. And there was a particular connection there.
Yeah.
That's right. Also, the father of one of the boys who was killed 6 weeks before Kobe was killed, they were killed by suicide bombers. Mm-hmm. He came, and that strength was really very, very comforting to us.
Very good. Well, I want to thank both of you for being with us and for sharing your feelings and sharing your perspectives. And of course, the whole world just wishes there would be something we could do to take a little bit of your pain and your grief off of your shoulders. And I give you a lot of credit, and I hope you'll continue to do things in Kobe's memory and to be able to bring his name to the whole of the world and to accomplish great things on his behalf. And in the meantime, I think for all of us, of course, meeting somebody, perhaps not on a one-to-one basis, but at least through seeing and hearing what they have to say, takes a little bit of the distance away from feeling some of the pain of what so many hundreds of thousands of people are going through, living on the West Bank, the fear they're living in from day to day, from moment to moment, the shotguns, the stories, the tragedies that are heard on a regular basis. If you'd like to do anything to help the Mandells in their efforts, then you could, of course, help through sending anything you would like to the Kobe Foundation, the Kobe Mandell Foundation. You can send it to the address at the end of the show. That's to 318 Veterans Highway. That will be care of Chabad, and of course, anything should be given directly to the Kobe Foundation. In the meantime, I want to hope and pray that the situation in Israel should only improve and get better, and we should all be able to look forward to the days of true peace in Israel. Shalom.
Simchu v'simchas hagiulu, hinei Moshiach.